Quarterfinal rounds are here for the college football playoff, a traditional in some sorts meeting in the Rose Bowl, a giant against giant meeting in New Orleans, and a couple of upstarts elsewhere. This is the College Game Day podcast for December 30th, just a couple of days away from the start of the new year and a couple of days away from New Year's Day, the traditional holy day for college football. We'll also start on the 31st with one of the quarterfinals. Rece Davis and Pete Thamel here, pleased to be joined by Bill Connelly. Pete, I'm taking, for people watching on YouTube, I've decided to enjoy this spectacular Pasadena weather. Sometimes we come out here and the December, January Pasadena weather is overrated. I've been here when it's when they've had a frozen turf on the Rose Bowl, when the entire field was covered by a tarp and there was ice on it. There was ice in the stands. I've been here when it's rained torrentially and been cold and unpleasant. It is none of those things today. It's spectacular. It's probably, 68, 69 degrees, maybe something like that. Sun is out, not a cloud in the sky, just a pristine type of day in Southern California.
You're just rubbing it into Bill in cold Columbia, Missouri right now as Tigers are losing a bowl game. The weather is Big Ten-esque in SEC country, and you're just rubbing it in, Rece. I mean, look at that backdrop. That looks fake. Do you think that's a real backdrop, Bill?
I've got one of those great Zoom backdrops behind me, Bill.
Yeah.
And I was worried about you doing this podcast, Bill, because before I came out, I was watching the Tigers in a scuffle with Iowa. And by the time people listen to this, they will know how it came out.
Well, distractions are great. I can catch up and only watch part afterwards or none. I'm not writing about this game. I'll have to technically watch it. So it's fine. Good distraction.
But when you think about the 4 quarterfinal games, guys, I want to dive into all of them. I think one of the things, and I'm not here to gripe about the process of that. Easy for me to say. I'm not here to gripe about the process or the seedings, although I've said from the very beginning, I think this is not the appropriate way to seed a tournament. It was based, I think, in the idea of the NFL, where you see something very similar going on right now with the Vikings and the Lions and where they might be seeded, but everything is far more equal in the NFL than it is in college football. I only bring it up now to say this. It feels like the game in Pasadena could very well be the national championship game. I mean, I know everybody was completely out on Ohio State after they lost to Michigan, but this is still one of, if not the most talented teams in the country. Oregon has played the best of any team in the country. So, we're in the quarterfinal round, and this happens in brackets from time to time. I think this one was avoidable, but that's for a different podcast and a different day. But I would make a pretty compelling argument, Pete, that the teams that we're going to see in Pasadena, whoever comes out of that, in my judgment, will be the most likely team to win the national championship.
Well, it'll be the national championship game until the winner plays likely Texas. We'll pick that game. And then that game will become the de facto national championship game before the actual national championship game. So the top of that bracket, that was the bracket you didn't want to be in. What do they call them in soccer, Bill? The group of death.
The bracket of death, right?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Of death. So this was the group of death in college football, and either a duck or a buck is going to end up dying on that pristine grass in Pasadena this weekend. And it'll be interesting to see, and it is for another podcast, whether we keep this type of seeding, right? This tournament, the seeding was built for 5 power leagues. If Oregon won the Pac-12 and Texas won the Big 12, we would not have a scintilla of the percentage of gripes.
It would be like last year. Yes. Last year it would have been just fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think really what's happened here is, with all the power that's been gobbled by these big leagues, particularly as you see in the Big Ten, there's an old saying that's probably going to brought up a time or two on this podcast: pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. I felt like if they started gobbling the playoff after they just decapitated a bunch of these leagues by taking their best teams, I just think that would have been a little bit piggish, right? So instead, we're going to go back to the reactionary change, whether it is for 1 year, which would have to be unanimous. Do we do reactionary, or did wholesale changes coming again in the 26th season? So do we endure another awkward year and go? We will determine that. But yeah, I am, all that said, I am fired up, Rece. We do a full game day on Wednesday morning. I just think it's going to be an awesome 48 hours of college football, or however much you want to condense it to, Tuesday night and Wednesday. And there is no game I'd rather be at than Ducks and Bucks. I did a big story on ESPN.com this week, and just going back and reliving that last game. I mean, just the last 2 minutes had like wild plot twists. Like we could do a full podcast on the last 2 minutes of that game, right? Never mind like all the other twists and turns with the onside kick and the botched field goal. Like there were a million different things that happened in that game. It was awesome. So there's no game I would have rather have seen a rematch of this season than that one.
Bill, what would be different in this game as opposed to the regular season game? What would be the most significant difference? I know Ohio State structurally has done some things to make sure Caleb Downs is closer to the ball. It's more involved. They've blitzed a little bit more. They certainly, as Ohio State has done over the last several years, when they step on a rake and hit themselves in the face, they tend to adjust very well. They did that defensively after Oregon. They did it offensively after the Michigan loss. What do you expect to be the primary difference in the way the game unfolds this time around as opposed to the game in Eugene?
Yeah, I think if you look at the way the game played out, offense has definitely had most of the advantages in the big plays. There was one sack; it was near the end, and so if there's a change in this game, I mean, Oregon's the only team that scored more than 17, I think, against Ohio State. They scored a couple touchdowns more than 17. So if there's a change, you would figure it's that Ohio State's defense has more success. Now Oregon's could too. Ohio State, like they've reminded us on a few occasions just how obnoxiously good they can be, and they're number one in SP Plus. They were number one even after the Michigan game. So I think they certainly have the highest ceiling of any of these teams. But their offense has been in a lot of different directions at times, and so we'll see. But I would say like there's a reason why Ohio State's the favorite, even though they lost the first game. I do think their defense has a little bit more to offer than it did the first time.
You know, I look at this game and as many adjustments as both teams have made, and Oregon will have Jordan Birch back this time. That was a point of contention when we were in Eugene on a number of different levels that will be fully detailed someday after my career when I write the book, and people will not come out unscathed as a result of that, but I digress. But Oregon will have Jordan Birch back for this game. Ohio State comes in, I think, with the most talented roster in the country. Yeah. But I think Oregon's got a better quarterback. And not that I don't think Will Howard is good. I think he is good. But I think that Dylan Gabriel for a college quarterback is exceptional. And so the question becomes, can he make that big of a difference? And with Jordan Birch back, Pete, and Ohio State's reconfigured offensive line, which started in the Oregon game when they lost Josh Simmons, and then prior to Indiana losing Seth McLaughlin. And I think it's 23 different combinations. I think Marissa Dowling told me it was not only that, I've forgotten the number, is 7 or 8 different starting lineup combinations, something along those lines. At any rate, they've tried a lot of different things in order to protect Howard. Now, they did a good job against a really good Tennessee defensive front in that home game. They answered the bell and stood up to the challenge. And the question for me, one of the biggest questions, is can they continue to do that and mitigate what I think can be a game-winning difference and edge that Oregon has at the quarterback position. And that makes it sound like I'm bashing Will Howard, and I don't mean that. I think Will Howard's a really good player. I just think Dylan Gabriel may be if they play long enough, he's going to be the all-time leading passer in the history of the sport. I know he played 6 years. I got all that, but he's put up prolific numbers, unlike many we've seen in the whole history of college football.
Yeah, so I think, I talked to Chip Kelly for a while at Media Day this morning, and the way that Ohio State called the game against Tennessee really took some pressure off that offensive line. Will Howard had a great quote. I asked him, do you like the misdirection and the pre-snap maestroing, like kind of running the orchestra? And he said, when you're a quarterback running an offense, you want to feel like you're dictating to the defense what they have to do. I thought that was a really good way to sum up how that game felt. It felt like Ohio State was, Tennessee was just struggling to catch up to them, to follow them around, the pre-snap motions, the smoke, the misdirection, all that stuff. And when I asked Chip Kelly about it, it was interesting because us, mortals who don't know all these X's and O stuff, they'd be like, they'll just do that again. And Chip basically said, well, we did that because that's what Tennessee's defense allowed. And what he didn't say, and I'm ascertaining from that, is that Oregon's edges are just different, right? Mateo Uyunglele was a monster in this game last time. I really thought it was a breakout game for him. And I had some scouts tell me a year from now, we're going to be talking about him in the 26th draft as a prime guy. I don't know if he's going to be a top 10 pick. It's too early to say that. But like when the mock drafts come out next July, I think Mateo Uyunglele is going to be a big factor in that. But what they have are athletic, versatile edges, and they really have athletic interior big guys. Like this is the same conversation about D-lines that we talked about, the guys Nick had at Alabama, like Kirby's had at Georgia, Urban had early on at Ohio State, like giant but mobile interior guys, and then edge guys that you won't fool as much, and you can't get away with as much on the edge. One of the opposing coaches I spoke to for the scouting report I did for ESPN.com this week brought up a great point. He said, there's no way to quantify this, but he's like, Oregon's just faster than anyone else we played. And you don't really appreciate that speed until you're on the field with them. But it's like, wow, they're fast on the interior. They're fast on the edge. Not that Tennessee's slow by any means, but I just think it's just a different vibe that they've given off. So
maybe interior, Pete, but those two, I mean, as you were saying that about the edges, I'm thinking Tennessee's got two guys that are going to get picked in the first round. On the edge, I mean, James Pierce is going to be, Josephs is going to be a first rounder when he becomes draft eligible.
But I feel like Pierce, to me anyway, is a pass rush specialist, and that's what he is, right? There's nothing wrong with that. He's good at it. He's going to make a fine living doing it. I feel like they have a little more versatility on the edge and a little more athleticism. So again, we're zits on the Mona Lisa here in picking a little bit, and then schematically, they may just be a little different too, where they can't get where that stuff may not be as effective. So it'll be interesting to see how early they get to that. And it'll be interesting to see that because I thought that protected Will Howard, all the different formations and motions protected him as much and gave the line a chance to get settled and get in and go. Howard's a fascinating case, Rece, right? Like I made a joke in my column today, like, he doesn't get ticketed for jaywalking. He gets indicted by grand juries when he makes mistakes, right? Like, he is like super efficient, and he's he has the highest completion percentage of any quarterback in the country. Like he does everything right, except when things go wrong, they go way wrong, right? Yeah. Like if you think back to the two huge mistakes in the Penn State game, the pick six and the fumble, obviously the Michigan game, the interception late was really probably the biggest play in that game when he threw the pick on 3rd and 7 in the red zone. And obviously, he had some moments in Tennessee that made you worry a little bit. And then obviously the slide in the Oregon game, is the moment it was made for. So it's a fascinating dichotomy. Like goodwill, 98% of the time is as good as any quarterback in the country, but the 2% of bad will we've seen, and I say play percentage, has way overshadowed the reliable, serviceable 5th round draft pick type guy we've seen.
If you read between the lines, you're going to be able to tell who I'm talking about, but not the one that you were talking about, the one going in, the interception going in the red zone against Michigan, but the one coming out of his own end zone. Yes. A very prominent former Ohio State receiver put like 99.999% of the blame on the wide receiver and the way he ran his route. If you go back and watch it, he rounded out, it was an out cut, and he rounded like 5 yards downfield and allowed the Michigan corner to squat on it and intercept it. So, there's a lot of things sort of to your point about Will Howard getting blamed. It's going to always, the interception is always going to be on Will Howard. Now, it could be that then Chip Kelly's going to come back and say, prominent former Ohio State receiver, that is how we wanted the route to be run, and Will should have read it this way. And fair enough, man, if that's the case. But it certainly didn't look like receiver out cut 101 when you watch the tape of that. Sorry, Bill.
This was kind of Will Howard at Kansas State too, where it was mostly phenomenal and just a couple passes you got to get away with if you're going to win the game. And I thought it was really funny. Like heading into the season, I do a most important players piece. It was obvious who was going to be number one. It was Will Howard, and it's still Will Howard, and he's got to win 3 more games. But my point was, like, we don't necessarily know that he's better than Kyle McCord yet because, just a completely different environment and all that. They finished the regular season. He was like 0.2 points in total QBR behind Kyle McCord. Like they were exactly the same productivity level. And it was just kind of interesting. It was a big move, and we don't know if it's paid off yet, but he's certainly got a chance here. And he did great against Oregon last time, despite the fact that Oregon's run defense was more successful really against Ohio State than it was against Penn State and a lot of other teams this year. So that'll be interesting too.
He's talked a lot. One thing about Will is that he has said that the ending of that game didn't sit right with him, and they've been looking forward to getting a second crack at them. He, as you mentioned, all the focus on the slide and on, whether revisionist history or actual trickery from Dan Lanning to get the 12 men on the field and all of that stuff. But he played brilliantly. He used Ibuka and Smith in outstanding fashion, very high completion percentage, very productive, couple of touchdowns when targeting both of those guys. They had a ton of success with Will Howard. And as for the Kyle McCord point, I think I would go ahead and venture to say that I think the more precise passer is Kyle McCord. But for what Ohio State now likes to do and letting the quarterback run some, Will Howard was probably the right move. You're going to bring in, I know they brought in Bill O'Brien first, but with Chip Kelly there, Will Howard probably fits a whole lot better than Kyle McCord would have. And, the best revenge is living well, and Kyle's living just fine, putting up big numbers at Syracuse and turning himself into an NFL prospect at some point.
I do. It is. I'd completely forgotten about Bill O'Brien, by the way.
It was only like a day and a half. He was in Columbus a day. He couldn't even find his way to the Junto before he had to go to Boston.
He was there a month.
Connelly, if you're predicting this game, do you guys want to go ahead and pick this one now?
Sure.
Who do you like? Who do you like and why? How do you think the game plays out?
Well, we're talking 60-40, 55-45 either way, but I do think Ohio State, maybe it's just recent impressions. And, the last time we saw them, that was like just about the best team performance any team has had all year. But again, they're number one in SP Plus. They've been number one. They're just a little bit better. And I'm going to go with the team that's a little bit better.
Is Oregon 2, Bill?
Yeah. 2, and among active playoff teams, Texas is 3. So it is going to be, this is de facto title game until the next de facto title game, followed by the actual title game.
I said that, but here's what I meant by that. Texas is wildly talented, and I know Ohio State had the, massive screw up game. I get that. But you don't see the recurring issues that you see with Texas, whether it's the turnovers or the inefficiency in the red zone. And they're as talented as anybody, but that's why I said that about this game. These two teams, by and large, over the course of the season, to me, have been the most crisp teams, the best executing teams. And, look, I know a lot of Ohio State people listening right now, giant aberration. I got it. I understand. They lost to the team with more wins in the history of anyone in the sport. They got upset. Things happen, but I still think that these two teams are the best teams. Texas is, when at its very best, probably they're equal, if it gets there, but I don't know that I've seen that type of consistency from them. But Pete, please proceed. Who do you think is going to win the Rose Bowl?
I think Ohio State's going to win 33-32. This game, the last time it was played, had so many weird quirks. Remember the line drive onside kick? I think Oregon was like 2 of 5 in the red zone at one point in scoring. There was just like a bunch of random things that have happened. And I think there's 2 clear deficiencies to me. One is Ohio State's line and then O-line. And then Oregon's secondary, when you talk to scouts, again, they're very good college players. Jabbar Muhammad, great college player. But they don't have elite talent in that secondary, much like Ohio State does at the receiver position. So I think that's where the tension is. Can they block Ohio State block long enough to allow Will Howard to exploit that secondary? I also think we'll see a little bit more QB run to keep the Oregon defense off balance some. But I think Ohio State's made enough changes, especially with their blitzing and pressures, where I think they can. I think it'll be another fun, quirky. I think there were 7 lead changes last time game, but I think the Bucks. I'm going to go with the Bucks, who have just like a little edge to them right now.
Yeah, I was going to also mention, I do think Oregon probably overachieved a little bit more than Ohio State the first time around. But when I was looking back through the stats, I'd forgotten that Ohio State had 2 fourth-down conversions in the first half and scored off of after each one of them. So that's you combine that with Oregon's red zone performance, and you do have just a couple, blip plays either way, and suddenly Oregon's winning by 10. So yeah, I don't want to discount Oregon at all here, but I'm going to lean Ohio State.
I think because I've had such an infatuation with Ohio State's talent all year, and I believe the first time when they played in Autzen, I think I picked Ohio State to win the game. When you look at this from an historical standpoint, they're meeting in the Rose Bowl for the third time. It's the sixth time that the Rose Bowl has been a rematch of a regular season game, and it's pretty evenly split on there were 3 regular season Rose Bowl sweeps and 2 ended up being splits. So, the whole theory of it's hard to beat a good team twice comes into play. Then again, you look at Texas and Georgia's beaten Texas twice. So maybe if you're better than them, you can beat them twice if you have maybe particular strength that the other ones don't. I don't know if it's like an institutional belief in Ohio State that kind of has me there, and the SP Plus would back me up. But when in doubt, if this game is decided by double figures, 10 points, Ohio State will win the game. But I'm going to pick Oregon. I'm going to say with the better quarterback, that we'll have another close classic game. And Dylan Gabriel has done this. Did it against Ohio State. He did against Texas when he was at Oklahoma last year. He's led late drives against great defenses and paid them off. So if you guys are going with Ohio State, I will save the graphic and save the podcast. And I will go with the number 1 undefeated team in the country. And for their reward in this bracket, they will beat maybe the best team in the country and then go to the state of Texas to play Texas, which sort of gives away the pick that we'll have later on, the Peach Bowl. Let's go to the Sugar Bowl, the other behemoths in terms of national brand recognition that are both squaring off against each other, Notre Dame and Georgia. Georgia has beaten Notre Dame all 3 times that they've played historically. Georgia won. I ran across a great stat from that 1980 national championship game, right? People are worried about how Gunnar Stockton will play. There's no way on earth that Gunnar Stockton will be less productive than Buck Bellew was in the national championship game. Buck Bellew, who I think, I don't know what Buck does these days, but at any rate, he missed his first, I think he was on radio or something. He missed his first 11 pass. He was 0 for 11. And then finally completed a 7-yard pass for the only passing yards of the game that sort of allowed Georgia to hang on and run out the clock in that national championship game. I strolled down memory lane, and there was a play that I'm sure Bill remembers, maybe Pete does too, that I'd totally forgotten about, that led to Herschel Walker's dive over the top in the end zone. Georgia kicked off, and there was a miscommunication between the return men from Notre Dame. Both thought the other one was taking it. And the ball kicked sideways, and it turned out to be the longest onside kick in the history of football. And Georgia recovered it at the 1-yard line, and Herschel scored. Outside of Herschel's 150 yards rushing, Georgia had minus 30 yards of offense. Minus 30 yards of offense. Now, that has nothing to do with this game, but I only bring it up to say Gunnar Stockton's bound to have more than 7 yards passing, and he is bound to put up more than minus 30 yards of offense outside of whatever they can get from the running backs. But I think new quarterback for Georgia, and Riley Mills has soaked up a lot of the attention in terms of injury, but Notre Dame is also without a first-round corner, in my judgment, in Benjamin Morrison. They're also without 2 other guys who in the early part of the season were starters on defense. So they are pretty well into their depth chart on that side of the ball too, Pete. And it really makes you think this is going to be what most of the Notre Dame Georgia games have been over the years: slugfest defense. Whoever can get somebody not to field a kickoff, it might be the determining factor in the game.
And I think that some scouts, when I previewed Notre Dame, Indiana, talked about that game being played out in a phone booth, right? Because there wasn't a ton of great skill. And look, against Indiana, Notre Dame's skill looked pretty good. Jordan Faison looked like a really, high-end receiver. They have Bo Collins and Jaden Greathouse, very good college players. I think the Georgia game plan isn't exactly going to to let it rip for Gunnar Stockton, right? So I think this would be, I don't know what the over-under is, but I don't think this will be a high-scoring game. I think these are two elite defenses, two very good defensive lines, even without Riley Mills. And I think this is just going to be like a rock'em sock'em robot kind of like push, 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 punt, push, 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 punt. And then it's going to come down to special teams and opportunism and, maybe some big plays. Obviously, Notre Dame got that in the run game, which Jeremiah love in the first playoff game. So yeah, I think it will be a classic, tense, taut, low scoring Sugar Bowl.
There have been 3 Notre Dame Georgia games, one at the end of 80 and then a couple more here in the last, 5-7 years, all basically exactly the same games, pretty low scoring, back and forth. Notre Dame usually leads at some point. They did the last couple. And then Georgia makes a stop at the end and wins. And that's the whole game. And, that result's not going to surprise a single person if it plays out this time. But it is hard to see this being some sort of free-flowing game because even, with that late bomb to Faison to kind of lock up the game, to score those final points and lock everything up against Indiana, even with a 44-yard bomb, Riley Leonard averaged like 8.9 yards per completion. And a lot of that was 5-yard pass where they kind of fall forward for 8 yards. And it kept the chains moving. But that's going to be a 5-yard catch against Georgia. And, the number of big plays in this game, it's going to be low. Whoever has more of them is going to have a really, really good chance of winning this, at least if you turn that into actual points. So, the next completion of a pass 20 or more yards downfield will be Gunnar Stockton's first in college. He has not done that. In a couple of years, he's basically just kind of, either been playing in garbage time or last week or a couple of weeks ago against Texas, basically just nibbled for the most part. And at some point, one of these quarterbacks is probably going to have to complete a downfield pass. I'm not really sure who that's going to be.
Poor old Gunnar Stockton, just stumbling around out there at 4-star. All he did was.
You see his pickup truck, Rece?
I did. 1984 Ford F-150. I did a little search to find out because Carson Beck was driving the $300,000 Lamborghini, and the F-150 he has more than 300,000 miles on it. One can be had. Those are resilient vehicles. One can be had for around $13,000. Their ease of repair is they're noted for that. You can look under the hood and make sure you get things running again, which is pretty much a metaphor for what Gunnar Stockton is going to try to do with the Georgia offense. I mean, I don't know how in the world we can even expect poor old Gunnar Stockton to even take a snap. I mean, all he did in high school was throw for more touchdowns than Trevor Lawrence and more yards than Deshaun Watson set those records. He scored more touchdowns running than Jahmyr Gibbs, who seems to be able to find the end zone fairly well at Georgia Tech, Alabama, and with the Detroit Lions. But I'm pretty sure Gunnar Stockton's going to be really, really overwhelmed. And, this is going to be a rough game. Poor old Georgia and poor old Gunnar Stockton. I just hope he can come out of that with his psyche intact, Pete. It's going to, what was Gunnar Stockton? Gunnar Stockton was just a mere 4-star recruit. I mean, South Carolina, Alabama, Clemson, that's all. That's all.
So here's a really interesting Gunnar Stockton conversation to me is Georgia had Fernando Mendoza in on a visit, I think 2 weekends ago, right? Yeah. So it's an interesting moment for Gunnar Stockton. We're in the full hand wringing of the calendar, the portal. Gunnar Stockton is not only making his first start in a college football playoff game. He's not only making it in the Sugar Bowl. He's not only making it against Notre Dame, but he's also auditioning for the full-time job next year too. If Gunnar Stockton lays a big old dinosaur egg, a little bit like Emory Williams did for Miami, Georgia's probably going to have to dip in the portal to find somebody else, right? So, if you talk about the highest stakes audition that we've seen for a starting job, I don't know if there's a higher one than the one Gunnar Stockton is waltzing into, at least modern. I'm sure there's examples of backups having to play in the playoff or in postseason and everything, but I just think it's a fascinating moment in time. And I empathize with Kirby Smart, who has to build his roster for the future. But if you roll out some high-profile transfer with a bunch of starts, it could kill the confidence of the guy you need to go try to win you in the national title. So I just think it's an interesting confluence of timing for everything with the Bulldogs. Poor old Gunnar will be fine. But, there's more riding on it than one giant game.
And, it's also interesting, too, because they've got Jaden Rashada, who, the
Right.
$13 million man who didn't get paid at Florida, went to Arizona State for a minute and has, given way to Sam Levitt and is now backing up there. And of course, if you really want to make sure that your quarterback position is handled efficiently, just hand it to the former winged beaver from the Avon Old Farm School for Boys, the finest school for boys in all the land, and let Ryan Puglisi take over there. You should be fine.
I got a lot more faith in Ryan Puglisi than old Jaden Rashada playing for the capital G. I'll just leave it at that. So that has nothing to do with his prep school coaching. He was coached well by John Hooley, my friend, who's and your friend, who's the coach at Avon. But I don't think old Jaden Rashada is going to be leading the charge for the old Bulldogs. I don't think that's worked out so well.
So what is this game? When you look at this, Bill, Jeremiah Love, Darian Price, Riley Leonard, and non-sack yardage, all like right around 7 yards per carry. Price even gets more yards after contact, I think, than Ashton Genty does. Yet this Georgia team's been run on at times, just not against Texas. And it almost indicates to me that in most cases, if they're interested, you're not likely to run on them. And I would suspect they're going to be interested when they play Notre Dame on New Year's night.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. I've just been frustrated with Georgia all year because it's just a series. It's just a series of, okay, well, now they've turned it on. Nope. They've turned it back off. Okay, we're going to wait 3 more weeks. But it was like the first time I tried to do an NFL version of SP Plus was the 18 season when the Patriots, I got to basically learn what the Patriots do, which was spend 90% of the season in second gear, make the playoffs, and then go ahead and shift in. So it was, of course, underestimating them dramatically in every single game down the stretch. I feel like we're doing the same thing here. It's just they haven't really been elite. They don't have as many scary dudes as they have in these the last couple of title seasons, especially. Skill core defense is obviously good. They're going to tackle better than Indiana did, and maybe that alone makes the difference. But still, just they're not as scary. They seem more resilient than any Georgia team in recent history, but they've also had to be. So yeah, I've been going back and forth on this constantly, just because I've been wrong about Georgia in like every single game this year, and apparently, no matter what I do, I'm going to be wrong about them again.
I missed Bill's like emotional angst that he gets towards teams that don't play, that don't like merit what his numbers tell them they should be. Bill always gets tortured.
I like knowing what I'm talking about. I like knowing what I'm talking about. I haven't not known what I'm talking about all year with Georgia.
They've trailed 9 times this season. That's more than any team in the playoff. They have 7 comeback wins. Duke and Liberty have one more. But Pete, you brought up an interesting thing about the special teams. Notre Dame giveth and taketh away on special teams. They've got the worst field goal percentage in the country. Arizona State second. They had open tryouts for kickers, apparently. Georgia makes almost all of theirs. Notre Dame has blocked 3 punts. They blocked 6 kicks in all, tied for most in the season. But they've also had 4 field goals blocked. They've had 4 of them blocked, and they've been successful on fake kicks 3 times this year. So the special teams could be it. That might be where Marcus Freeman, who easily this would be Marcus's biggest win of his career if he could get it. And but it might be that a fake kick. What was the line you used in writing about Lanning? I think you were writing in the preview, Pete, something about fortune favors the bold. Well, that might be He's
the living epitome of fortune favors the bold. Yes, like if he can take a risk, he'll take it.
Yeah,
he preferred to cross the street, not in the crosswalk, into traffic.
Maybe you don't have to go Lanning, Dillingham having his quarterback run 1,000 yards backwards and trying to lose your spot in the playoff. Maybe you don't have to go that far. I still cringe
thinking about that. Like it just gives me like a visceral oh.
Yeah, I read an article somewhere this last week or so about Kenny, and it was his high school coach who got him into this, who I think now is in some capacity on the staff at Arizona State, said that he looks at things and sometimes you'll think, well, that's completely ass backwards. If that was one of those things he was looking at, that actually was completely ass backwards. So don't do that again. And I don't think he will as a result. But Marcus Freeman might be well served to have a little touch of that in this game. Not that Notre Dame's completely outmanned, but I don't know. I don't know that they have the guys that against the Georgia defense is just going to take the top off of them, save a bust. If Love gets loose, he's going to run away from people. But, they might need to steal a possession. They might need to fake a kick, but they need to do it in the right spot and mitigate some risk in there. You can't be, as I dig back into the archives too, you can't be Kirby Smart faking the punt with Justin Fields in the SEC championship game. You can't, that's not being bold. That's being reckless. So you need to be bold, not reckless, if that makes any sense.
This is easy points are everything in this game, either whether it's a turnover, whether it's a risk gone horribly, or whether it's a random Jeremiah Love run or something. It really is going to be, there's not going to be much easy in this game at all. Mm-hmm. And whoever gets a few easy points, that might make the difference.
I'm going to pick the game. I think Jalen Walker is going to wreck this game. I don't think Notre Dame is as stout up front as we're accustomed to Notre Dame being. They're very good, right? But they had been like elite. They've had like their left tackle drafted, like every left tackle for like the last. Again, they're very good. They have good players there, but they're just not quite that mauling, marauding group that we're used to there. And I do think Georgia's front is going to show up like they did that night in Austin, really, really limit them. And I think Georgia wins 17-13.
I realized that, right after the bracket was revealed, we all sent our picks in, just our reflex picks in. I've already violated it. I had Oregon beating Notre Dame in the title game. So that's toast. But I'm going to stick with the other half and go with Notre Dame just so I can be wrong about Georgia one more time. This is a team. I have a buddy of mine's about the most fatalistic Notre Dame fan in the world, which I realize is very much saying something. And our offensive line's already hurt. We're toast. Another lineman got hurt. We're toast. Cross is hurt. Benjamin Morris is out. We're toast. And he tried to sell me on that again after the Riley Mills injury. I'm just like, I'm not buying it. This just makes me more confident in you guys, and I'm just going to keep right on doing that. I guess this is a physical game. This is going to hurt to watch on television, I think.
It's I actually think it could be a really fun game to watch. It's going to be physical. It's going to be old school. I mean, if you think about Georgia's record since 2021 against everybody not named Alabama, they're 52-1. That one loss being this year against Ole Miss, a game which, they made a lot of mistakes. But they've also dodged a lot this year, as we've documented already. And I think I've proven over the last couple of years in this podcast my deep belief in Georgia's resolve and Georgia's championship character and Georgia's championship mettle and how it comes through in spots like this. And I do believe that Gunnar Stockton, while inexperienced and unproven, is a very talented player. And I recognize the passing game limitations that Riley Leonard and the Fighting Irish have. That is not a good combination. But, I think Notre Dame's going to win the game. I think
they're on McAfee too long with these okey doke picks, Rece.
Yeah, I think I learned from Lee Corso, and so I know I do think Georgia's the better team, but we haven't seen, and not that this is going to be a massive upset by spread, but we haven't seen the one that go, whoa. In the playoff yet, and we saw quite a few of those in the season. And one would think that one is coming down the pike. Now, look, this could wind up 27-10, and and make me look bad. But I'm going to say it goes 16-13 Notre Dame with Mitch Jeter, the much maligned, occasionally injured, knocking in a field goal from outside of 45 yards to win the game for the Fighting Irish and send them on to the semifinals. The other game on New Year's Day is Texas and Arizona State. Texas, a 2-touchdown favorite. They met once in the Holiday Bowl, for whatever that matters. Back in the day, an old Big 12 team against the new Big 12 champions, Dillingham, that we've touched on briefly. He's done a marvelous job. And I'm going to tell you, Arizona State, Bill, they're not just an underdog. They're a yapping underdog. I mean, there is a lot of talk coming out of this activated valley. And, this talk about, which is fine if you can back it up. And I kind of enjoy it. It gives us good fodder to talk about on game day. Sam Levitt saying, I'm going to prove I'm the best quarterback there. Cam Scatterbo, while not as incendiary as this might sound, basically saying nobody can stop me. Well, this coming from a team that was 6-1 in one possession games. And for those wins, the team that they ended up beating had the ball at the end of the game with a chance to, with a chance in the final minute. Have a listen to this. Texas State had the ball at their own 30-yard line. Not much of a chance there, but they at least got the ball. Kansas, with 16 seconds left, got it just inside their own 30, made it into Arizona State territory, didn't get the score. UCF started on their own 22 with 5 seconds left, at least, had a chance. And BYU, we've talked about that, the one at the end. And they lived to tell about all of them. Typically, that will not bode well for next year in the Big 12 if history tells us anything recently. Teams that win all the close games don't do so the next year. But this isn't next year yet. It's this year. And Texas turns the ball over more than any team left in this playoff in terms of turnover rate. And Texas, Scatterbo might be able to run on them a little bit. What do you see in this one?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I see. Like the path here is Scatterbo outdoes the Texas running backs, which is not a given because, like you said, only Georgia has stopped the Texas running game in the last month or month's worth of games, I guess. That is a huge thing, though. He's going to have to just continue doing the bowling ball thing that he's done so well, especially these last few games. They're going to have to win the first 20 minutes. And most of the games in this 6-game winning streak that they're currently on, they were up like 21-0, 28-7, something to that effect. They're going to have to get off on the right foot. They're the hottest team in the country in terms of overachieving against SP Plus down the stretch, but they haven't played in a month. And so does that still apply? Have they cooled off a little bit? Has rust kicked in? So either way, they're going to have to start super fast. And then, the last part is I said the same thing about Clemson heading into the first round, at least a +2 turnover margin. Texas is generous. It's the only reason why the A&M game was within 10 points. They gave the ball away 7 times in 2 games against Georgia. They are willing to give the ball away, and Arizona State has to pounce on that. And if they do all those things, it could be yet another close game that they figure out how to advance from. But I mean, Texas is just down for down, obviously a better team. That's why they're the most comfortable favorite in this round.
I would love to conjure a case for Arizona State here because they've been the single best non-Indiana story in college football this year, right? Picked last, finished first, rolling. Love that they're swashbuckling into the Peach Bowl, talking junk. Go for it, man. Go for it. Let's go. Why? There's no need at this point to one game at a time, right? So if you're Sam Levitt, you think you're better than Quinn Ewers. So just say it. That's fine. I'm good. I'm good with the Valley activated. Kenny Dillingham's homecoming. I'm good with all of it. Where I can't conjure the case for Arizona State is from a pure pound for pound talent level. All right. Texas is going to have a dozen plus guys drafted. Arizona State is going to have, I'll just kindly say, less than 5. No Jordan Tyson, which is really going to be a big deal in this game. Look, Cam Scatterbo will get drafted. He's a really nice player. But if any program is designed to swallow a run game whole, it would be Texas. They don't have the D-line they had last year, but they have a really good defensive line. They have great linebackers. They're just really well positioned to put up a wall. And if Scatterbo can't get moving, I don't have a lot of faith in Sam Levitt being able to throw the ball for 300 yards with the weapons available, with the O-line. So I just don't see a lot of clear paths to victory here for ASU. So we'll pick the game later, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, Jordan Tyson was, if you cut his production in half, he was the number 1 and number 2 receiver for Arizona State this year. He was, and they got away with that against Iowa State because the run game was working so well. They have fast guys. They can run a couple play action bombs, and that's going to work out well for them in that regard. But Scatterbo has to just carry so much weight in this game, and he might, but it's going to be rough.
Bill, I think it was in your piece you were talking about the one thing, rushing success rate against Texas. I think is the Texas defense in that regard is fairly pedestrian. Most people listening to this podcast know the drill on that. That's getting half the yards you need on first down, 70% on second down, and converting on third or fourth down. So Texas will let you move the ball a little bit running. And I love watching Scatterbo. I had him on my Heisman ballot. I had him third. I had him third behind Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty. And I had a real struggle with 1 and 2. I thought both were deserving guys. But I was pretty dead set that Scatterbo, based on what he did, deserved to be on the ballot. And I thought he's sensational. Love to watch him. Contact balance is just out of this world. His story is tremendous. Coming out of Sacramento State and guys that, passed on him and didn't believe this can't be real. And he's turned out to be more than real. And Pete, I agree with you. While I have chuckled a bit at some of the yapping underdog Arizona State motif, I'm here for it too, man. I mean, you're in the playoff. You're Arizona State. You're in the playoff. If that's how you've gotten to this point, keep it up. Keep doing it. Don't be intimidated by Texas. There's the subplot too, that there are half dozen Sun Devils that at one time or another played at Texas, including, Zach Swanson, who has a bitter taste in his mouth, defensive lineman, basically saying that Texas told him, yeah, you can stay here and be a student, but you probably ought to consider giving up college football. You're not good enough. So they kicked me out and told me to quit football. So you're going to have a number of guys with that proverbial chip on the shoulder, whatever that means. It means, they're going to be psyched and motivated. But I think the one thing that a yapping underdog can do is it sometimes can get the attention of the other guy. Yeah. And, Texas let its foot off the gas a little bit. All credit to Clemson for getting back into that game. But Texas maybe helped them a little bit. I think you're going to get Texas absolute A game. I'll start the predictions here. I think Texas is going to win and cover the spread. And the only way I think that they don't is if they do some of the things we talked about earlier. If they don't convert in the red zone, if they turn the ball over, which they've done a ton. But I think Texas will overpower Arizona State and pull away in this game. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, I think it's like a 31-10 situation here. I just think sheer physics and sheer mass and sheer talent are too much to overcome here. Now, I'd love to see it, right? And maybe they get Texas puckering a little bit, but boy, it's hard for me to conjure past the victory.
I'm going to just make it unanimous so that we can jinx something fun into happening here. You do feel like this is a game where, it's going to be haymakers early. Somebody's going to be leading by double digits in the first quarter. Maybe it's Scatterbo touchdown run and a quick pick and so on, or maybe it's the other thing. The SP Plus projection is 33-17 Texas. I can see something 30. If they win, I do figure it's like a 38-14 kind of situation. There's absolutely one of these times we're going to have the margin for error skew in the underdog's direction. It's going to be awesome. But I'm not going to pick it. I'm going to pick the team that's much, much better.
So a clean sweep across the board. Then there's the game on New Year's Eve, the Fiesta Bowl, which has been a palace of great memories for both Penn State and Boise State. Boise State bursting onto the scene with the crossing pattern lateral, the dig lateral, if you will, to set up the winning play on the Statue of Liberty against Oklahoma, 2007 after the 2006 season. They also finished off a perfect season in the Fiesta by beating TCU. Penn State has never lost in the Fiesta Bowl. Their most notable win of knocking off Vinny Testaverde in Miami, winning the national championship in 1986 with 5 interceptions. And here they come on that hallowed ground for both Penn State going up against the 3 seed. The Broncos coming in with that underdog mentality too, perhaps some of which that I contributed to unwittingly. Apparently I said, and I stand by it because it's true, that Penn State had a very favorable path into the semis, if not the national championship game. And I do stand by that. They do. But a favorable path doesn't mean you get there unless you take advantage of it. And playing SMU at home, playing Boise State, as opposed to, I don't know, playing Ohio State, might be a bit more favorable path. But, this Bronco team's really good. They haven't faced a defense built anything like I know UNLV ranked in the top 25 or whatever, somewhere in there, as people, they haven't seen anything. Like, with the exception of the Oregon game for the last 2 months of the season, haven't seen anything like they're going to see from Penn State defensively. And the question is, can they run the football against it?
Right. No, and what I've loved about Genty and Boise State this season is that, whatever, they've been very patient. Basically, if you try to play things pretty straight, Genty's just going to torch you from the start, and that's going to be the end of it. If you kind of overload in that regard, Maddox Madsen has taken advantage of a couple of San Diego State. He was really good against San Diego State. He had a couple games where the numbers were favorable, so they threw him more, and it worked out really well. And then eventually Genty also got going and got his 130, 40, 50 yards after 60 minutes. So I like the patience they've shown there. They're definitely prepared for, like, if he gets slowed down, here's what we're going to do. They just haven't had to deploy that very much. So I love all that. And Penn State is another team that, good running back duos, whether it was USC's early in the year, whether it was Judkins and Henderson, Oregon ran the ball well too. This isn't the absolute best Penn State run defense that we've ever seen. So there is an opportunity. I don't think they're going to overcompensate for Genty, at least at the start of the game. I think they're going to try to play it up and make him make huge plays. If they do that, he might have a decent amount of success. I think the problem for me in this game is that Madsen, three best defenses they faced are Oregon, UNLV, and UNLV, and he completed like 53% of his passes at like 8 yards of completion or something. Cam Camper, I loved him at Indiana. I think he's got some potential. If he's not catching a couple of deep shots or making a couple of big gains, the passing game's not going to do anything damaging, and they're going to have to do a lot else right to have a chance in this game.
So my favorite moment as a sports writer was that 07 Fiesta Bowl. I would love to do like a whole podcast about how awesome that game was. I mean, Adrian Peterson was Oklahoma's tailback, the hook and ladder, all the gadget plays. It was just the proposal, right? Like that was the college football gods shining in all their just mischievous brilliance on one game. I would love to see something similar, right? Boise channeling those roots. I was there when they played TCU. There's a fake punt in that game that was one of Chris Peterson's highlights of his time there. I just pound for pound don't see it here again. I will say that Boise's run defense is very good, and they showed their mettle all season long. They obviously played Oregon as tough as anybody did, and really caused Oregon to kind of recalibrate a little bit as they went. But for 60 minutes, just blocking the Abdul Carters of the world, I'm just not there that Boise's got enough magic in him.
That's you get in trouble comparing opponents, especially when there is a long period of time between the games. Both of these teams played Oregon. Boise State very, very nearly got out of Eugene with a win. Oregon had to return a couple of kickoffs for scores in order to pull that game out by 3. Genty, lest you think that all of Genty's big runs came against Mountain West, the lower echelon of Mountain West teams. He put a 70-yarder and I think a $192 and 3 touchdowns on the Ducks, who are number 1 and undefeated. So they've proven they can, and even with an offensive line this year that's had to do some shuffling, that's had to deal with some injuries up front in front of him, they've still been productive throughout that. I think Penn State's allowed one 100-yard rusher all year. They certainly gave up points to Oregon, but they moved the ball against Oregon too. I don't know whether that tells us that Penn State and Boise State are better than we think, or maybe the Ducks have some flaws that haven't come out yet. But I sort of see it the way I think you guys do. I mean, it would be a great story. Spencer Danielson is a bright young coach who's become a friend of the podcast, friend of College Game Day, easy guy to root for. One of the first things Pete Thamel ever said about him to me when he was talking to me about him. Easy guy to root for, and I think all those things are true. Boise's an easy story to root for, always has been. But man, oh man, there is potential for a pucker factor in this game, because even though Boise State is the higher seed, Penn State's a favorite. If Penn State has this game close late, here we go again. Big game, James, all of that stuff starts coming into play mentally, at least on the outside. So I think there's a lot at stake for Penn State in this game on New Year's Eve night. That they got a favorable draw, and now they need to take advantage of it and then get past this game, move on to the semifinals. And if they do that, they'll, regardless of whether they play Notre Dame or Georgia, if they were to beat Boise State, they're going to be the healthier of those teams, and they would have an opportunity to move into the national championship game. So I think there's a lot at stake and a lot of pressure on Penn State to get off to a good start and kind of put Boise behind and make Maddox Madsen, as good as he's been at times, make him make the plays. Don't let Ashton Genty control the game against you. Don't let them do what they want to do. Make them do something that, Bill, as you alluded to, that maybe they can do, but they haven't had to do very much. Make them prove they can do it against this Penn State defense.
I mean, the one thing about the big game, James, thing I've always been frustrated with is it's not necessarily big games. It's, are you favored or are you an underdog? Since the start of 22, they are 33-1 as a favorite. And the one loss was when they were not much of a favorite against Ole Miss in last year's bowl game. So, like, they eliminate uncertainty. They make sure whatever advantages they have, they maximize them. They're really good against teams like Boise State that are very talented and top, 15, 25, whatever. They just make sure that their talent advantages count. And that's awesome. If we're picking games here, I believe in college football lore, and college football lore says Boise State does amazing things in the Fiesta Bowl. And I'm not, I don't care. Like, there better be a Statue of Liberty play involved. I love that they, brought that. They had a call back when they were there for the Fiesta Bowl in 2014. I want, if they don't run either a Statue of Liberty or a hook and ladder, it's a sham. I'm going to demand the game be replayed. But I believe in lore. I say Boise State figures out some magic, and we tie college football's history together in this new era.
Ian Johnson better lead that team out of the tunnel.
I mean, that'd be another wasted opportunity.
Somebody better ask for someone's hand in marriage at the end of that game. That's what we need, like Ian Johnson did.
That was unbelievable. I'll never forget. I've been in a lot of locker rooms after losses. That Oklahoma locker room was one of the most pulverized I'd ever been in. Like, I felt like I was trespassing walking in there. I mean, it was eerie, the silence. I remember Bob Stoops just standing there, like, staring at the ceiling. Like, and I'm about to ask him a question. Like, he was like, how the F did that just happen? Like, all of all the crazy memories from that game.
I tried to tell him for a month, Pete. I did my best to tell him that's a good football team we're playing. I guess they didn't believe me.
Watch the statue. Watch the statue. Yeah, I can't get myself there. My heart wants me to get there. My head just isn't ready to go, unfortunately. So, but this could be like an all-time pucker power too, right? Like, it could be an all-time pucker power. So I hope we see some pucker power. I want a great game. It feels like there's two like highlight games, and then there's two, double-digit kind of games. And I want one of the double-digit games to be underdog games. I want one of them to activate.
Boise State's a really good team. Really good team. And, Spencer's done a great job. Genty's generational player there. Maybe, probably, with all due respect to Kellen Moore, Genty maybe the best player they've ever had. And they've had a lot of other guys in the pro. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little afraid to pick Penn State in these situations.
Wow.
I understand what you're saying, Bill, and you're right about, favorites, and they handle their business when they're favored. But I'm going to. I think Penn State's going to win the game, and I think if they can get past this, and they might be dangerous to the winner of the Sugar Bowl. I think if they can get past these two, avoid the face plant, and then really gain a little bit of confidence, I think Penn State will control the game defensively. I think they'll probably force some turnovers. I think they've allowed one 100-yard rusher all year. I think Woody Marks hit them for 100 when they played USC. I think Penn State's hitting its stride a little bit, and it does scare me a little bit because of their history, a little institutional history there with them. But I'm going to pick Penn State to win, and so I think Boise will put up a fight. If I had to pick one of the two underdogs to pull the upset, I would probably pick Boise. Just because of some of those things. If I had to pick one of the two, but I think both the big guys will win, and we'll have big brands all in the semifinals. Guys, it's been fun. My setting for this was much more attractive than yours, but it's great getting together and talking. We'll do it again here on the College Game Day podcast immediately following the Rose Bowl. There'll be a quick little emergency edition following the Oregon-Ohio State game, and then I think a follow-up perhaps after the Sugar Bowl between Georgia and Notre Dame as well. Wish all of you a Happy New Year. Thank you for listening, and download this wherever you prefer to get your podcast, or better yet, subscribe so you never miss a single episode.